and it always helps if I unmute myself. I tell you, it's going to be a great night. I've got dessert in a glass here, brought to us by, actually, this is not sponsored by, just joking here, but I did go ahead and do a screenshot of the bottle. This is Weldon Mills Caramel Apple. It's very sweet. It's very low alcohol, actually. It's only 60 proof, but it's great as a dessert. I'm just going to say that. So cheers. If you don't have a drink, go grab one. We usually have fun with these shows. So tonight is hopefully no exception. Tonight we were supposed to have a guest, but unfortunately that guest couldn't make it tonight. So I scrambled a little bit. I posted something last night in the Facebook group, and it actually got some of the traction that I was hoping for. So in the spirit of this show, we're going to be going through that post tonight and talking about it. And I'm going to give my comments, of course. And, we invite you to give your comments as well. And speaking of comments, I do see that we have Keith Nelson in the house. Thank you, sir. It says fans are waiting for the show to start. I thought I started it close to on time. Plus, I know a lot of people are at ASCII Edge in Toronto, and a lot of people are at Taylor Big Big this week. So don't know what the crowd's going to be tonight, but always welcome everybody here. I do want to say, because I don't say this enough, first of all, thank you for all of those who participate in the group, who participate in the live streams. We really do appreciate it. But we don't frequently give the background of what this group is about. All Things MSP, I started it about 7 years ago, and it was built around my desire to give back to the community, but not in a technical way. And so I wanted to create something that would give everybody a community to talk about the non-technical side of being an MSP. And so that's what we do here at All Things MSP. Now, of course, it's a technical business, so you can't 100% separate the technical from our discussions. And of course, we do rely on sponsors to support the show. And so most of those are the vendors that you see out there in the industry. And we do thank them for their participation as well. In fact, I should probably go ahead and talk about one of our sponsors. So the sponsor of tonight's live stream is Produce 8. And did you know that knowledge workers are losing over 2 hours daily to collaboration overload and digital distractions? MSPs can help fix this trillion-dollar problem. For 20 years, MSPs have provided essential technology services. Now they can empower clients with digital work analytics to enhance productivity. Learn how MSPs can become strategic advisors, driving business productivity and employee well-being. Head over to atmsp.link/produce8 to discover new revenue streams, book a demo, and get your questions answered. Don't miss this opportunity to differentiate and grow your business. And I think that's a big part of this. Is I really think that one of the most important things that I like to see when it comes to stuff, new opportunities in this business, is things that are truly unique. And this is absolutely one of those things. And the reason I think it's important is because it's not your typical recording your screen and stuff like that. They actually go into the process, and we've done a couple demos here on the show, but the thing that really gets me is this is positioned as a productivity coach for your employees. It's not going to give the owners, the managers, the whatevers, the detailed information of the activity of an individual user. It's going to aggregate that data so they can make better management decisions overall, but it's not that eye in the sky, big brother type of spy on you type of software. It truly is a productivity coach. All right. Now I need to find, there we go. I lost you guys for a minute there. I had to go find you. The problem with multiple screens and everything. So anyway, the theme tonight is about a post that I posted earlier. And of course I put it in the title. Is the client always right? And there's a lot of great discussion on this. And of course I invite everybody to discuss this either in the chat, or if you'd actually like to join me on the live stream here, If you're somebody that I know, if you're a frequent person in the group, we're happy to have you on the show. So here's how the Facebook post went, and let me go ahead and share it because then everybody can see it. Let's see. Share screen. That looks like the right one. There we go. Although I'm not crazy about that orientation. So let me see. Yeah, okay, this is better. And let's see, what does Keith say? Keith says aligning with business process and business outcomes always a great idea. Yes, and that is kind of, and I'm glad Keith that you're on tonight because this is something of an expertise of yours, and I was going to drive the conversation in that direction. By the way, is that it's about business outcomes. It's not about allowing the client to just tell you what they want. Okay. But first of all, let's go through the post. And let me go ahead and, yeah, you guys are just going to have to deal with me not looking directly at the screen while I read this. So, my original post says if the client is always right, what does that make you? MSPs are professionals. You are paid for your knowledge and experience. Does that make it unethical to do what the client wants when we know there's a better solution? Now, I use those words specifically because I wanted there to be some back and forth on this. And then I finished it up with, do we have an identity crisis where we are not perceived as professionals? How do we solve for that? And I think that's a different question with a different answer. But we're going to get into that too. And let me just do something really quick because the chats are coming in kind of small. There we go. So Keith is saying the customer is always right, except when they're wrong, because we failed to gain their confidence, align with their business values and mission, and provide them education to make smart decisions. I probably should not have shown that yet because yes, I mean that's a lot of what it has to do with, and that's kind of the bottom line here, right? But I want to go through each of these comments because a lot of these, even some of the ones that I disagree with, they bring up very, very good points. So Jacob said, agreeable until they are ready to hear slash trust you. So that kind of goes to what Keith was just saying, the alignment and, making sure you understand them and they understand you. And let's see, what did I reply here? What just happened? Okay, well, let me go back to see all comments. Yeah, let's do it this way. Okay. So Billy said, learn to say no and set expectations. It's not rocket science. Agree and disagree. Learning to say no and setting expectations, absolutely. I think that you'll see a theme through here that if it's not the right fit as a client for you, you should probably say no. Setting expectations, if you've been here for any length of time, you know that expectations are a huge thing with me. And I totally agree with that part of it. It's not rocket science. There are some rocket science pieces to it. I will say that there are some nuances to doing it well that are complicated and probably unique to your business. So I'll disagree with the rocket science part, but the other stuff, very true. And let me say it this way. It doesn't have to be rocket science, but it can. If you dive deep into it, it can get there, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. Okay. So you're right and I'm right. And, hey, that's the way this works. Mike says, no, we aren't setting everyone's password the same. No, I don't want to know anyone's password. Yes, we need to use MFA. We are the authority. End of story. So I actually like this. Oh, we got Craig Willard in the house too. Hey, Craig. I was wondering if you were going to show up after you commented on this, because Craig commented on this today as well. Um, but I want to get so Mike's comment here. Um, absolutely. I love some of these points because they really do point to the minimum viable client, is what I'm going to call it, because they can't be that much of a risk um, to your business. Because if you had these things, uh, multiple risks here, right? Setting everyone's password the same means you have absolutely no idea who does what, right? And then, no, I don't want to know anyone's password. Again, that's a huge risk to you because now you have access to imitate those users, and just not a good thing, and not a good thing when it comes to trying to prove things in court. Um, and yes, we need to use MFA. If they refuse MFA, I think you should run. Um, and then we are the authority. End of story. That one, that one probably goes a little farther than I would take it, but I understand the sentiment. So Keith also commented, it is not the right fit. I always ask, why did you pursue the wrong fit? Again, this is why you should be setting expectations. Again, starting with yourself, because you should set your own expectations as what the ideal client looks like for you, and then also what that minimum level of client looks like for you. Because I think that there is, or should be, a minimum level of client for every business. So that's just my personal belief, but especially when it comes to IT and the inherent risks in security, I think that's important to have that minimum level. And if they won't adhere to that minimum level, then you don't want them as a client because it's too much of a risk for you. You don't want to take on that risk. Rocket science is not rocket science. Speaking as a graduate from JPL. Yes, Keith Nelson, PhD. You're right. All right. And an old colleague of mine from my head nerd days at SolarWinds, Joe Carey says, for me, it's again about setting proper expectations at the beginning of the relationship. And your contract, your managed services agreement has a lot to do with this. And Justin and I talked to Brad Gross about this in an episode on contracts not that long ago in the podcast. So you should check that out. Coincidentally, Marvin B is also having his live stream tonight is on contracts. So you might want to head on over to that after this show. Anyway, so it's about setting the expectations at the beginning of the relationship. In my view, the relationship between an MSP and their clients should mirror that of a doctor and their patients. Again, that level of professionalism. Both relationships are built on trust, expertise, and confidentiality. Absolutely true. Sorry, I'm just checking a couple of things here. Okay. Again, doctor wants to change your meds. Your MSP wants to change your endpoint protection. It's the same thing. Like the MSP should have the freedom to do that, and the client or the patient, in the case of the doctor, should be okay with that. And again, yeah, I think this is a delineation, and this is one of the reasons why I really like this post, is that in some cases, MSPs are just the IT department, right? But that's not what I think most of us are striving for. Most of us are striving for solving for the IT problems of the business, not just providing outsourced help desk at this point. So Joe, thank you for that comment. Dan says everyone wants to be so nice. True. And that's kind of the way I was when I started this. And so I totally get that. But again, nice doesn't make money. Nice doesn't get the job done either. And I would also say that nice doesn't protect you from ransomware or some other type of incident. And so definitely something to consider there. Let's see. Craig says that patient-centered care, though, Doctors are being pushed to be more receptive to what the patients want to do. So I think that's a good point, Craig. And what I will say is I'll kind of go back to something that Keith said back at the beginning of the show. And that is, and he's going to basically reiterate it, solve the business problems, enhance their business securely using technology. I think when it comes to the patient-centered care, there's a difference between the patient saying what they want and the patient saying what they want the outcome to be. So I don't know that, I'm, obviously from your comment, I can't get all of the context around that, but that's the way I'm thinking. I'm thinking that if I, as a patient, go to a doctor in this patient-centered care model, that I'm looking for an outcome, not a prescription. I'm leaning on the doctor's expertise to prescribe what I need for the outcome, which is kind of what Keith is saying, right? Keith says also make sure you have huge wins, client engagements that get your prospects' attention, establish your credentials, earn respect, and give respect. I think that especially in our situation where we don't have professional accreditation or licensing or certification. I mean, we have technical certifications, but we don't have a certification to be an MSP, right? The closest thing is we have the new security trust mark from CompTIA on the security side of things. But because we don't have that set of credentials or that licensing, it makes it very difficult for a client to vet us out without having these huge wins, these things to establish our credentials, right, as an MSP in the space. All right, back to the post. Joe says it's not a question of ethics, because I did kind of slide that ethics thing in there in the original post. It's simple. You give the client your recommendations and they can choose to go with them, or they can choose to do what they ask. As long as you give them your reasons why you would not recommend it and do what you can to mitigate risks, it's not on you. Or let them find someone else to do so. And I think that's the decision you got to make, right? Is this client right for me? Am I willing to take on this amount of risk for this amount of revenue? And I think there's an equation there that you have to do, where you go, if I'm going to take on this extra risk, I'm going to pile on this extra revenue. And at some point, I don't think that the risk actually validates the revenue. I think there is an amount of risk that it's not worth any amount of revenue. He goes on to say, I had clients for the longest time that demanded terminal servers that were accessible through the internet. We all know why that's not recommended and the risks. Yep, we do. But they did not want it restricted to VPN or whitelisted IPs. Yes, because there are some things you could do to minimize your risk for running a terminal server, right? Sure, I could have refused, and they would have probably found someone to do what they asked. Instead, I mitigated the risks by having the firewall block any IP that failed to log in 3 times. So basically, he found a technical solution that minimized his risk. And that's exactly the process that you should go through, right? Because they said what their outcome was. They wanted to work remotely. Back then, really the only way to do that was to use a terminal server. I mean, there were some other ways that you could cobble things together, but the generally accepted way from Microsoft was to use terminal services. So they found a way to minimize that risk. And this kind of goes back to the ethics. Long as what they ask does not break the law or run afoul of regulations, we do what we can to try and help them steer to better options. And I think he and I had some other comments about this. And I asked him, what would you have done if they did not allow the added security? He said, yep, it would not be illegal or breaking any regulations. I would have informed them of possible downfalls and risks in writing and done it. It's the same as clients that don't want to pay for proper structured backups, etc. My problem with that is you can't always mitigate risk with written notification. And so one of the things I want everybody to be thinking about is, does this actually get you to a level where you're comfortable with the risk and you're making the revenue that if something goes wrong, you're covered by insurance, you can afford the lawyers, whatever it is. And Keith is commenting, I would disagree with out of compliance and customized solutions that become burdensome to support. Having a set of standard solutions reduces your cost, your exposure, and provides results. So, yes. Now, Keith, I would call that an optimization, right? And totally agree with the standardization. As much as you can, you should providing standardized components to your customized solutions, if that makes sense. And that's what I really think is the fine line sometimes, is how much do you customize versus how much do you standardize, because you are trying to aim at a business solution. And so it may require some custom pieces, but the more you standardize, the better your margins are going to be, and the better your security is going to be, because your risk profile is going to be same from client to client to client. So great points, Keith. I think that is one of the ways you can kind of mature your MSP, is by being able to build custom solutions with a standard stack. All right. And Craig Willard says, it's borderline negligence when the MSP knows better but allows the client to dictate. It's a brutal path. And I think that is one of the reasons I actually wrote this post, right? Is because I do believe that there is a point at which there is negligence on the part of the MSP if they allow the client to say, this is what we're going to do. I don't care what you say. And I think that there's the point at which it becomes negligent for me is when it becomes so much of a risk that there's almost no chance that there's not going to be an incident, which is kind of a low bar, right? Because we all know that everybody can have an incident, but it's almost like guaranteed that they're going to have one. And at that point is where I think you have to say, no, we're not going to do that because it's too much of a risk. And I forget who I was talking to. I was talking to somebody one time, and we were talking about how it's not just a risk to you and to that client. Because of the way insurance works for you, it's actually a risk across all of your clients. Because if you have one client that's risky, that introduces risk to you, that introduces risk to everybody else. And if you have a claim and you can no longer get insurance, or you have some other problem with it, it's very likely that it's going to spill over to other clients. So something to think about. Keith says, when we say we are doctors, you cannot tell your doctor, cut off my head to cure brain cancer. Very true. Extreme, but true. Go back and gain the client's confidence using your background, references, and education. So I think this is one of those things that differentiates the outsourced help desk type of MSP and the virtual CIO type of MSP, right? And honestly, I'm just going to say this, Keith and Craig, you guys probably just should have been on the show tonight. Okay. Would have made for a much more interesting show for the rest of everybody else if I wasn't having to read the comments. But yeah, I mean, that's the difference, I think, between help desk, outsourced help desk, and being a virtual or a fractional CIO, is educating them versus just providing a service that they write a check for. Okay. And Keith is saying it's also a risk to your reputation that is not easily mitigated. Absolutely 100% true. And Keith, I think that was part of that conversation as well. Craig says, we recently had a prospect that didn't want some of our solutions. She shook hands and walked away to be there when we were ready. Our name matters. Yes. Again, back to that reputation. And when they have a breach, the client doesn't. Craig says, say we use company X, but didn't take the best package. Yeah. And Keith says, I'm here. I can join. Well, Keith, okay. Yeah, let me go ahead and, what's the best way to probably send this to you? And of course, I think did I close my email? I may have. To save bandwidth, I closed my email. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and send this to both of you. I think, yeah, you guys were both on a show before together, so you both have each other's email addresses anyway from that calendar invite. So there you go. Okay. I invited you both. Keith says packages suck. Solutions are the only package. Keith, in an ideal world, I'm going to say yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, we're not in an ideal world. And so I think that it's not always, I don't think that's always the case, because I think that there is a certain amount of people who are kind of, how would I say this? They're looking for more commoditized IT services. And so I think that's, and I think we're always going to have that component to it. All right, everybody, welcome to the stage, Keith Nelson. If it works. Keith, are you there? Let's see. Let me take him off stage, put him back on stage. Let me see if I have to stop sharing. Nope, that's not affecting it at all. Let me go back. There he is.
Is that better?
That's better.
All right.
And you and your company too.
Technology, we need smart guys to do it.
Well, one of these days, we're all going to get used to, having to do Zoom calls and use things like live streaming.
Yeah. So this is a great topic. I kind of watched it on Facebook, and I think it's really a difference between the older model of MSP and where I think it's going, especially as regulations come in, where you're moving away from here's a stack, here's a package, we're kind of a broker of service or commodity reseller, to really aligning with your customers. And when you do that, these topics go away. I mean, it becomes a different discussion where you're telling them, I know what you want to accomplish, and here's the best way for you to accomplish it. And I laugh when people talk about, oh, I'm going to save $5 here and $10 here, and I say, wow, how much is your payroll for your company? And for MSPs, the same thing is like, people say, oh, I'm going to save $2 per agent doing it this way, and I go, well, let's see, one 15-second help desk call, and now you're in the negative,
right?
And so when we have these questions of customers coming up and say, I've always done it this way, I think we need to turn that conversation to say, tell me everything you want to accomplish, and let me give you the best practice way that'll be less frustrating for your users, that'll give you the best uptime, and that we can support securely. And I think you've changed the tone.
Yeah.
And just like I said, when I go down to the port of LA, I don't pretend like I can drive a crane, and I don't expect them to pretend like they know how to do a dispatch system. Which, by the way, I'm going to go off script and brag a bit. Yesterday, there was a huge outage in the ports of LA and Long Beach. It was on the news. All the power was out. One system didn't even fail for a second. We remained up the entire time. And that's because we have those discussions with our customers saying, we know what you want to accomplish, and we'll get you there. And of course, yesterday we reminded them, remember how all your other systems are down? You kind of took our advice and you were dispatching all day.
Yeah.
And
it's awesome. Yeah, and Craig, welcome to the show.
Hi, Craig. Yeah, how you doing?
Hey, Keith. Eric, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, we're always, you guys are always welcome. You know that. And this is one of those topics where I know each of you have a lot to say. And Craig, you mentioned in one of your comments just a couple minutes ago that you literally, had a prospect that, you guys shook hands and walked away from each other.
Yeah, sorry about that. It limits me on text, so I couldn't put everything in there. But that's
no worries.
That does happen. We don't offer but one set of solutions in our this is what we have. And so when people will attempt to cherry pick or say, well, we don't really feel like that's important, we just say, well, we're here when you need us, but we're going to have to, we'll just walk away. Let us know when you're ready. Because the reality of it is if we allow them to not have an MDR solution or something like that, which is really critical in our opinion, if they do have a breach, they don't, and our name gets thrown around as the MSP for that company. They don't say, well, we didn't take all of their solutions. They just say we use Simplify T or we used whoever. And that it just does a disservice to people, and it does a disservice to our insurance, their insurance, and everyone in between.
Yeah. Now, both of you, I know, use pretty much standard stacks to standardize your service offering.
Yeah.
Now, the question I have is, how do you both take a standard stack to build a custom solution for a client?
Keith's processes are a bit different, and I would say they're quite elevated from a process perspective. Ours is probably a bit more typical of the MSP space, and we have taken as a standard structure the things that every company needs, the basic levels. And we've talked about this for another podcast of yours, but we rely heavily on cyber liability insurance policies to kind of show what they're seeing. And then we do the best we can to get them in the best position to have the best types of insurance, the best coverage, and all that stuff. So we start at the lowest level, but we give a lot so that we can ensure that they fit in every organization that we prospect to.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say we're real similar. All businesses need about the same thing.
Sure.
So when I tell people, don't sell on stack, doesn't mean we don't have one. I have a background stack with all the costs, and I know what it costs me per user or endpoint. I just don't sell that, right? Sure. But the stack is the same, and everyone needs the same things. Everyone needs security. Everyone you need remote access. Oh, great. Craig's having a cigar. Now I'm getting jealous.
Sorry, yeah. Hey, my apologies. I would be glad to hear if you're here.
And then you kind of just wrap that around. I just don't use that terminology.
Sure.
I don't say I'm putting an MDR and I'm putting because they're going like, I don't care. You're trying to act smart. So we just tell them that we're doing these things around their business terms. Like I said before, we have big screens on the wall of the dispatch center. They're not called big screens on the wall of the dispatch center. They're called chalkboards because that's their terminology.
Right.
You'd walk in and go, that's just an 80-inch screen on the wall. And I go, no, that's a chalkboard, dude.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree. Yes.
You see a computer in the corner with a touch screen built into a thing, and you go, that's a computer in the corner with a touch screen. I go, no, that's a check-in kiosk.
Correct. Yeah.
And so it's talking their language, which I think builds that respect we talk about. You know what? When people tell me I have to fire a customer because they didn't listen to me, I go, when did you lose their respect? You must have had it when they signed the contract. So what happened in the interim that they decided not trusting you? And maybe it's because you have this attitude, well, if you don't listen to me, or it's my network, or I'll fire you if you don't obey. When you go, you take the steps in the beginning and say, I'm going to conform with you as much as possible. Because remember, we go to story branding. They're the hero, not us. Yes. And so you leave it that way. And then when you tell them how to do things in their language, in their environment, I mean, I saw that post earlier, and I'm not going to deny the guy's quandary, but I'm going, I cannot think of a customer that told me I want remote access to my file share for my customers, and here's how I want to do it. I just don't, that conversation's abstract to me. I hear more of my customers do this and this, make it efficient so they can access it all the time.
Well, Keith, I'd say that you probably have a really good way of vetting who you're going to choose to even sit down and have a conversation with. And that's probably part of it too. It's making sure that the person across the table has the understanding of this is they're not coming in to dictate. We're coming in to teach, educate, and to help them be more resilient, as well as you talk about, which is help them with their business processes to make sure they continue to make money and they don't have interruptions. And if they do have an interruption, it's quickly mitigated so that it doesn't take very long or whatever else. But I totally agree with everything you're saying, for sure.
Yeah, we lead with things like, you called us because you heard about the ports of LA not having an outage for 25 years. You called me because you saw we automated the C-17 final assembly shop floor and got them paid 60 to 90 days quicker on delivery of ships or planes, which they call them ships. And you're going, so you called me because you know I can get results. Now, how can we do that for your business? And that's where I talked about you talk to them, you gain their respect through what you've done, but you continue to give them respect. And I think that's what we forget at times.
Now, is part of that, Keith, being able to speak in their language? You talked about the computer in the corner with the touch screen, calling it what it actually does, what the benefit to the client is, rather than just physically what it is.
Yeah, and how you get there is a different. One of your sales guru called me up and said, would you do a webinar with me and show your presentation stack? And I turned to him and I said, there. That's my original sales presentation stack. I carry 2 of them with me all the time. And what I normally tell a customer when we have our first meeting is, I've heard amazing things about your business. Can you show me around? I want to know about your business. I don't talk about us. They've already called me. They know about us. I learn about their business. Then when I go back with my proposal, it's all based on their lingo, their site-specific needs, which makes it very hard for someone to compete with me. Because if you got called up as MSP and said, I want you to replace Vistum at the Port of LA, you need to put up 5 day boards, some check-in kiosks, some order entry stations, some DHA reconciliation machines, you'd be going like, I don't even know how to do that. So that's deliberate.
Right. Sure.
And
so, Craig, when you're in that kind of pre-quote discovery phase, do you do something similar?
We definitely, so I use the old coaching mentality of you always, you work with them where they are always, and you never talk about technology. It's and as Keith alluded to, they already know who we are because they've called us and asked us to come in and have a conversation. And we don't really talk about much at all about, we talk about their pain points. We seek pain. We ask questions. We inquire about where they've had struggles or how they had uptime issues, things of that nature. And then we pull as hard as we can. And Nick, our sales and slash owner, sales guy slash owner, is really good about helping them find, they may not even think they have pain, but finding it and then calling that out and then helping them with a resolution to that so that they no longer have that pain is very powerful.
Now, we have, I don't know the name of the person because they just put Job Technologies as their YouTube user. In the comments, they're saying, I just talked to my consultant today about learning how to say no to non-ideal MSP clients when they come to me for a small project. So, Keith, how do you handle when somebody comes to you and it's just not a good fit? It's not your ideal type of client, or they don't have the type of problem that you would normally solve.
So let me just start and I'll answer the question. Small is not a disqualifier.
Right.
I could just say that, like I said, at Local 13 Dispatch Hall, it's a total network of maybe 35 end user devices. So small is not the disqualifier. I think whether they align with wanting to, if they're really looking for business enhancement, for business process engineering and re-engineering, and they understand the monetary value of that to their business. Now, for the ones that are small, and I get asked to speak at the Chamber of Commerce, and I do it because I've been a member for years, but it's, for me, a horrible spot for leads. I have a couple small MSPs in the area that I refer them to nicely. And I say, here's my friend who handles smaller units. And I sit down with them for the first meeting. And I know that's probably a waste of time, but I think it's ethically right and my fiduciary to the chamber for letting me speak. And I sit down and say, here's Ed. Ed's going to help you out. And I say, Ed, I talk to these people. Let's make sure we address security. That's one of their concerns. Let's make sure that you make sure their email system is up and running and accessible on their mobile devices. And I try and do a good turnover because those people may grow. They may end up at a different company. I still send them all our newsletters and informational things that we post about security and trends in the business. And you just kind of nurture those relationships.
Awesome. I really like that idea of the way you're handing it off. You're just not just making a referral. You are actually in the room to hand it off from, the person that approached you to the MSP that you're referring them to.
Yeah.
Craig, what about you?
So same with us. Price is really not, a small project it's a really good opportunity to be able to show your value, to create trust, create the relationship. And it's always been the small projects that turn into big projects. So when it comes to projects, and which is different, but when it comes to projects, we'll take most things that fit what we do well, and we'll hit them out of the park. We'll make sure they're super happy, and they always come back for some other solution. Maybe it's a co-managed, and we're more of a VAR where we deliver solutions they don't have access to or whatever. But some of even our small MSP clients, we have a couple 2 and 3 person that's several $1,000s a month. So we don't look at size so much from that side either. It's but we're not cheap, and so that's part of it.
I should also mention that at times as we have new techs coming in that are, just pretty new, I will take a couple of those small projects as a good learning environment. And I'll they're probably getting a great deal because I'll be over, overseeing it the entire way, and they're getting someone that has a GSA rate of $5.25 an hour for the normal network rate. And
that's a really good option for sure.
Yeah, because if you're growing, you're hiring people. There's always some natural turnover in people, and so having that ability to have those projects ready to go. And one of the interesting things, Craig, you kind of mentioned the delineation between projects and managed customers, and there's frequently hot discussions of whether or not you should do projects for somebody who's not a managed client.
Sure.
And I would be interested to know what both of your opinions are. I mean, obviously, Craig, you already kind of shared with us, you'll do projects even if they're not a managed client, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But Keith, what is your kind of take on that? Will you do projects as a standalone one-time thing, or do they need to be a managed customer in order to do projects for them?
We'll do a project for a standalone one-time thing if they'll still sign the same MSA and those background documents we require. I look at it and I say, we've done probably in the past 2 years, 3 or 4 standalone projects, and they're awesome customers now. Because I look at it and say, if I build a system, someone's going to have to maintain it.
Yeah.
And so, it may be strategically on their part as well, where they're saying, I don't want to jump into bed with you because I want to go steady first. And you're saying, yeah, they may be just teasing you with that project to see the quality of your work, the quality of your staff. So I don't say it's not an immediate disclaimer,
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I think project work is a great way to lead into a managed services contract, because to your point, Keith, once you've put something in place, I mean, obviously there are some projects that are kind of, you can just do them and then walk away, right? But in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to IT, there are, you do a project, but then you're right, you have to maintain that, or you have to hand it off to somebody else who's going to maintain it. Now, maybe if they have an internal IT department that doesn't have the bandwidth to do the project, but then they have the bandwidth to do the ongoing maintenance, I don't know.
We've had some like that. So we've done as small of a project as a couple $1,000 overview to make sure to find weaknesses in a network. It didn't take very long to do, but we spent most of the time creating a report, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Eric helped complete a several $100,000 migration over to a new VM infrastructure for a credit union. And then that turned into, now they're wanting to do a full infrastructure redo with us. And so the small ones, it's so strange because the small ones do end up becoming bigger. But some things we do hand off. Some things we'll do a simple migration to Microsoft 365, and then we'll manage the Microsoft 365 environment for them, or something little. And it's usually a little effort, low effort, but it creates the relationship. We get to have the calls with them all the time. We get to develop a much deeper relationship, which drives more of that other stuff. And we don't care whether they're it's co-managed, whatever. It's probably about 20% of our business, give or take.
And the plus side, if you're doing the project correctly, even if they have an IT company or they're in-house, that's your door open to the right people you need to talk to. Usually those projects are usually sponsored by finance or an internal department. And now it's up to you to make best use of that door being open. Call it an extended sales call.
No, for sure.
And I hear it often when you get, especially when you go to meetings, you hear kind of these strict rule MSPs, and I wonder how much of that's reality. I mean, I really do. I mean, I think that most of us are trying to get business. We're trying to qualify as much business as we can. And I think the issue is more with the sales cycle than with customers. And by the way, if you were sold good, better, best, let's just take it away from IT. If you went to the car wash and it said, my premium package is $52 and next car wash, it's $40. And it's a bunch of jargon you don't understand. They're talking about this wax and stuff that means nothing to you. What are you going to do? I'll sign up for the lease because they all sound the same, right? You have a gold package. You have a gold package. Both of them list 5 things. I think I'm going to drive away with a clean car.
I'm worse. I'm the worst for going for the middle. I always pick the middle. Not the worst, but not the best,
Well, there's psychology behind that.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of psychology behind that.
Right.
And so you feel like you're getting the best. And we used to do the good, better, best. It just doesn't make any sense, especially when you get into cyber, protection, stuff of that nature. You just find that people will go lower than they should. And then and Keith alluded to this earlier, and that is the amount of effort it takes. We are a low effort organization. We do not spend a crap ton of time doing the little things because we have the services in place to keep those things at a minimum. We use application whitelisting. They can't just download something that gets randomly installed and all of a sudden causes a bunch of problems. So,
yeah.
You're talking about effort. You drop down some levels, your effort's going to increase, no question, but your revenue has definitely decreased, and that's never good.
Yeah. I think it's one of the transitions we've made. We've gone from that good, better, best being more applicable in a non-risky environment where you are providing services that were relatively new. They weren't necessarily critical like they are today. IT is a critical part of the business, just like phone systems were 20 years ago, but they're more complex. And so now it's much more valuable to the client for you to come in and solve a business solution with technology and not sell them a menu of goods, not selling them a menu of technology, selling them that solution that, yes, you have a standardized stack that you use to build that solution on, but they don't get to choose what's in the stack anymore or what options they can have or not have.
Nor do I think they want to.
Correct.
I mean, you go to that, and I think you're training. I think we go through all this marketing term. Years ago we were trusted advisors. Now we're MSPs. Now we're MSSPs. I don't know what we're going to be next. but you look at that and you say those marketing techniques, and I'm not trying to badmouth vendors. Vendors are my partners. I buy them drinks at the bar, but their goal is to sell licenses, right? So you're using a technique that was taught to us to just move licenses. So
right.
So what you're actually doing is training your customer to price you. And I sarcastically say to people when they get insulted, and I say, in a world of Kmart blue lights, be Nordstrom's.
Yep.
And by the way, Kmart's broke. They're out of business, right?
And Nordstrom is not.
And so there is a race to the bottom. Look at Walmart's earnings as they race to the bottom. And you might as well get paid enough to do the job right. Because like I always tell people, if I hire the cheapest gardener, I'm not going to walk out to the ghetto and go, oh, there's weeds around my pond. I'm okay because I got it cheap. I'm going to expect to have the guy that keeps it. I want the Disneyland gardener. So if the gardener's going to come charge me, he might as well charge me the Disneyland price because that's my expectation. And I think all your customers are the same. You give them discount managed services. When they get breached, you can kind of say, oh, but you know what? We saved some money along the way. When their system's down and they're crying because they can't send out billing for the month, you go, but I save you like $100 every month.
Well, to add,
go ahead, Craig.
Well, say just to add to the vendor thing, this is a point that really bothers me about vendors and people that push this type of stuff. But vendors are really good about giving you white papers and sheets on their, on solutions, or there's a push to even at least get vendors to give you more. The reality of that, though, is you do everything that we're telling you probably shouldn't do, which is you're starting to sell solutions, you're selling widgets, you're selling commodities when you utilize these vendor solutions to deliver them and say, look, check out this Bitdefender white paper on why it's such a good product. Well, you're talking about the nerd stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how you should be delivering a proposal to any organization, is by giving them documents from a vendor. Like, to me, it's just not relevant. We don't even look at that stuff because that's not the idea.
Yeah, I actually had a vendor ask me to speak at a large event coming up, and we started talking on the topic. He goes, I hope you don't take this wrong, but you're not a good speaker for me to follow up and say, I want to sell licenses. And I said, I agree. I understand you canceling on me. Yeah. I agree. It's a different model.
Yeah. Right.
And they give you some, great stuff. But I go, why would I give a customer, a paper on how great, name it, Sentinel-1, whatever you use, is better than the other one? It'd be like me going to the doctor and saying my neck hurts, and he handed me the PDR. I'm going like,
yeah. If you're selling a commodity, if you are selling a solution because that's all they want, it's a they have IT, they just need a good solution, they need a good EDR or email security, and you want to give them a white paper for that, I mean, whatever, that's fine. It's just a product and you're explaining the product to them. But when it comes to managed services, those are off the table.
Right. And by the way, if I was to work with vendors, I would say the first white paper I want from you is a map on how to navigate your system when I have a problem. That would be the best thing I'd want.
Us. Yes.
Yeah, yes. That would be my problem, because I'm going like, we look good in how quick we can resolve issues. We all know stuff. I caught myself from swearing. Stuff is going to happen. We all know that. And I go, I want to know how to do it. And how do I resolve these issues? And how do I get through, navigate your system with the least amount of stress and on my staff? And you're going, that Amen. Would be the number one thing, the roadmap.
Amen.
Well, and I think that what you guys are talking about here is really the value of an MSP. The value of an MSP is to take those licenses from that vendor and turn it into an outcome for the client. And the vendor can't do that. The vendor can't have hands-on enough knowledge. That's also why I talk about this bifurcation a lot of outsourced help desk, the commodity side of IT services, and then what I consider managed services, the outcome-based, right? That bifurcation exists because clients need an outcome, not a license. And the MSPs, the ones who are in consulting mode, I'll call it, are the ones who are able to translate licenses into outcomes.
And we have to balance something, best of breed versus integration and ease of use. And yes. So that's a balance. You sit there and say, pick one, ConnectWise, Kaseya, one of those. You go, you can live within that, in that eco structure. And, or you go around and say, this one's better than this. And so that's the other thing we bring to the table is the ability to take a best of breed solution and glue it all together, which your end user customer would probably be pulling his hair out, and not implementing it to where it worked. If I sold you Sentinel-1 and you didn't know how to configure it and deploy it, you may have one of the better MDRs that's not much better than Symantec or McAfee. I'm aging myself. But, right? If you don't configure it right, you might as well take free AVG.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
Yep. Well, guys, we have managed to, talk for an entire hour. Thank you guys very much for joining me halfway through. I really do appreciate it. Because I know people get tired of just listening to me. I want to thank everybody who was participated in the Facebook post today. And next week, we're actually going to start not a series of live streams, but it's a series kind of by itself. But we're kicking off with a live stream. Next week, I have Tim Coach on, and we're going to start talking about sales funnels. We're going to talk about sales funnels generically next week, how it applies to both vendors and MSPs. And then we're going to have separate sessions, probably 2 each, 2 for MSPs, 2 for vendors, to go more into the specifics of the nuances and how they're different and the things that you should be thinking about in sales funnels. So again, thank you guys very much for showing up tonight. If you're looking for something about sales funnels, that's what we're going to be doing next week. And if you haven't had enough of managed services live streams tonight, Marvin B is on next. I think, yeah, just search for Marvin B on LinkedIn. You'll find him. He's always got a great show on tonight. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.
Yeah.